After this video, we will have covered 2 out of 2 interesting fighter airplanes of this most recent update. Wow, incredible, am I right? 2 whole fighters that are actually kind of worth covering. This is a squadron vehicle in the Japanese tech tree, so if you want to go ahead and grind this thing yourself, I do have a few open slots in my community squadrons, both of which I'll put on screen here. Just type them into the squadrons tab on War Thunder and go ahead and submit an application. Keep in mind, squadron vehicles are not researched in the same way normal vehicles are, so it is going to take a little bit longer, but you could always use today's video sponsor, GE for War Thunder. GE for War Thunder is an app available in the Google Play Store in which you will complete tasks of varying difficulty to earn yourself Golden Eagles. The harder the task, the more GE you get, the easier the task, the less GE you get. I recommend doing some of the easier tasks, get a small amount of Golden Eagles, and just get yourself a quick little day of premium time for a little bit of grinding. Click the link in the description down below and use my code on screen for 10 extra Golden Eagles. So we have a Japanese squadron vehicle F5E at 11.3 battle rating. What's different about it than the normal F5E in the US tech tree or the Chinese tech tree? And the answer is very simple. More missiles, better missiles. You are taking twice as many missiles as the normal F5E, so you get to carry 4 total missiles. 2 of those missiles can be Python 3 all-aspect missiles, as well as brand new AIM-9P4 all-aspect missiles, which are essentially, well, they are just an all-aspect AIM-9J or AIM-9P either way. Other than that, everything about this aircraft is identical to the lower battle rating F5Es, and that's not necessarily a terrible thing. At 11.3, your flight performance is better than some of the aircraft you're going to be fighting, such as a lot of Phantoms, F4Ss especially, are at 11.3, and of course your flight performance in a 1 vs 1 dogfight situation is going to be superior. Even stuff like F104s or Tornadoes are pretty common at this battle rating, and if you can get into a dogfight with them, of course you are going to win. The main problem is you're an F5E, and going supersonic in any situation is going to be kind of difficult. This airplane likes to hover around the Mach 1.0 range. It really isn't going to get any faster than 1.05, and you're going to have to kind of just deal with that as people are running away from you. Getting kills can be a little bit frustrating. Of course, if the other team is just going to throw the match and team kill each other and then fly straight right in front of your missile, let you get a lock and shoot them, like this clown of a game that I had that I just had to share with you guys, then sure, anything's going to work. On the other hand, there are plenty of planes at this battle rating, and especially so and higher battle ratings when you get up tiered, that will absolutely stomp you and be miserable to be playing in the same lobby against. I'm talking about the brand new F20, which is just you but better in pretty much every single aspect. I'm talking about J7Es, which are a lower BR than you. I'm talking about MiG-23 MLDs, so on and so on. There's plenty of planes that you're really not going to want to be getting into a dogfight with as an F5E. What's traditionally been cool about the F5E is that it's primarily been a gunfighter. It only has 2 missiles. At battle rating 10.7, it actually can put up a good fight with most of the planes it's going to be taking in a 1v1 or any kind of dogfight situation. It is very survivable. It likes to keep its speed extremely well at higher speeds such as the Mach 0.8, 0.9 range. It compresses just enough to where you don't really lose that much speed, but it's not a brick by any means. You can still actually make turns and maneuver around the furball. But that's at 10.7 or even in an 11.0. The issue with the F5E being 11.3 is that you're going to be fighting F-16s or Mirage 2000s fairly regularly, and if you're in something like a MiG-23 MLD, and this is still a problem because obviously an F-16 is going to clap you, with most of these other 11.3 aircraft, you can at least rely on your missile crutch, whether it be an R-24R, an AIM-7 Sparrow. You have weapons that are very capable at picking off, well, albeit inexperienced top-tier players, but it's still a better chance than just getting slammed in flight performance as you're trying to use your guns or your subpar all-aspect AIM-9Ps in that situation, and you're pretty much just average Pythons. In top tier, when it comes to a plane that just blatantly outclasses you, such as an F-16 versus F-5E matchup, you are going to heavily rely on the fact that you hopefully just have really good missiles, or at least missiles that are good at picking off somebody that's just inexperienced. These IR missiles that the F5E has, while the Pythons are still very good, they are still pretty easy to flare. They don't have IR CCM, and somebody that sees your missile coming is probably going to be flaring it. And so yes, I'd much rather have an AIM-9M or a Magic 2, an R-73, or hell, even a good SAR missile, so that in some situations at least, maybe I can kill an F-16 that doesn't quite fully know what he's doing. And of course, with the F5E, that's not an option, and sometimes, even if an F-16 decides it's time for you to die, well, it's just time for you to die. I don't want to sound like I'm being too negative though on this airplane, because I will say I had a lot more fun flying this airplane, the F5E, than I did flying the F20 in yesterday's video. It is pretty much the same style of gameplay, but with the F5 being at 11.3, your adversary is much more manageable. It's not F-16s everywhere all game and IRCCM missiles everywhere. And the classic survivable F5 flight model does allow you to zip around the furballs, just kind of not die to missiles. As long as you're paying attention, you can flare them relatively easily. I do recommend running standard countermeasures on your flares for the F5E, just because there's really no need for you to be climbing up to altitude anyways. You can just kind of stay low and multipath any incoming SAR missiles, and that way you can pretty much double your survivability against strong IR missiles. Again though, this thing's not 12.0 like the F20, so IRCCM is not going to be very common for you to be fighting against. It does have a radar, it's just not very useful because it doesn't have pulse Doppler mode and you don't have SAR missiles anyway, so pretty much the only thing you'd be using it for is for finding targets that may be the last one alive, or maybe if you're a sim player it's kind of useful, or if not, then you'd be using it for your radar gun sight lead indicator. But without the use of pulse Doppler on the radar, this airplane's ability to actually get a lock at low altitude is pretty much zero, so the odds of you using it for a gunshot are pretty slim. What does the F5 do best though, and always has done really well? It's just the perfect rat mobile, man. Flying around this thing with furballs, zipping this airplane in and out of the targets, going to the next guy, keeping your speed while doing so, because it's just a really good airframe for some reason at the Mach 0.8.9 range, where it just doesn't want to lose any energy. And as long as you can kind of keep it there and kind of tap your negative elevator key to make sure you don't lose too much speed in your turns, you can stay fast all day long and deal with pretty much the entire furball. And the limit is how fast can you spam your C key and look around. And I think at this lower battle rating, I'll call lower top tier, where everybody's kind of using these lower, older generation IR missiles that don't have IRCCM, this is the perfect playstyle that suits the meta. At least from a competitive standpoint, if we're talking about what can you do as an individual player to have a high impact on the outcome of your match, whether it be a win or a loss. And again, it's just flying around the furball, being a distraction, being good bait for your team, being there for your teammates when they're baiting, and it's just a perfect airplane for that. It might not be the most glorious play style where you're going to be getting 5-kill games left and right. A lot of my matches, and I think pretty much all of my matches, I think the highest kill game I had was maybe a 4, and I'm pretty sure all of my clips in this video are 2, maybe a 3 snuck in there. The games are not very high kill count, and I think not only is that a skill issue on my part, but it's also just a side effect of the F5's playstyle. You're doing a lot of defensive flying and a lot of baiting for your team as the F5 because, well, you can. You have the survivability to do so, and as long as you can be a solid distraction, your teammates are going to clean up the enemy team relatively quickly. I think my biggest gripe with this airplane is the top speed. I do wish it could go faster. That is a limiting factor at times. Sometimes you'll see somebody off in the distance that you just know is not paying attention, and you could definitely sneak one of your missiles up into their you-know-what, but you just can't catch them, and you cannot get your missile within range for a launch. And times like that are frustrating, and they are pretty frequent with the F5E, and it's a very slow top speed. And that's just from an offensive standpoint. From a defensive standpoint, it would be really nice to be able to just run away from somebody. But unfortunately, with an F5E at 11.3, this airplane can basically run away from nobody. As I said in the beginning of the video, if an F-16, for example, just decides that you're the target it wants to kill, and it's going to kill you, there's very little you can do about it except to run to your team and hope they save you. And I say run to your team, but you better do it really quickly because that Mirage or that F-16 or whatever it may be is going to catch you extremely rapidly. And if you don't have the superior 1v1 dogfighting ability, which very oftentimes you won't in these up-tiered matches, you're just kind of in a really tough situation, and it's going to be difficult to get out of. And it's not necessarily infrequent either. This is a real issue that I experienced in the F5, where sometimes people just force you into a dogfight that you have no choice but to stick because you can't run away. Overall, this is probably my favorite airplane of the patch. It's probably honestly a better grinder than the F4EJ in the Japanese tech tree. That is a premium vehicle, I understand. So how can this be a better grinder? Well, I would recommend getting this aircraft and then just slapping a talisman on it and researching the Japanese tech tree that way. I do not think that the F4EJ is worth the price tag, but not only that, it's just not a good airplane in general for its battle rating, and I would much rather be grinding with this. So overall thoughts, I do think it's a very welcome addition. It fills a kind of a gap in the Japanese tech tree. It gives the Japanese tech tree a more competitive grinding option, and overall it's just a fun little airplane to fly out. Do I like it more than the normal F5E at 10.7 in the US tech tree? I think it's a little bit too early to tell, but I will say I again did have more fun in this than the F20, and I think you probably will too. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you again real soon.